very nice to be here, and I really appreciate your giving up such a beautiful day. I can't believe the weather, but it's perfect. Today is Halloween, so happy Halloween. But the idea is this is one of the books in the Traditions of Boston series that I've been doing, and I started about 4 years ago. I did Christmas traditions in Boston. Well, it seemed to be a success. It was shared memories of Boston, of the enchanted village of St. Nicholas, Boston Common, and of course the department stores. So following that was Valentine's Day, Easter, Halloween, and Thanksgiving traditions. I'm writing Independence Day traditions right now. But I like to write local history, especially about businesses that we knew when we were young, or where our parents, bless you, where our parents or grandparents once shopped. So of course I've done books on Baker's Chocolate, Howard Johnson's, Jordan Marsh, S.S. Pierce, and I just finished The Christmas Tree Shop. I started the other day a book on Prince Macaroni, and I'm sure you all remember Wednesday is Prince Spaghetti Day. I realized I was half Italian as a child when people would yell the name Anthony every time I said my name. However, these are stories in some ways that we share, and Halloween is something that's not just a fun holiday, but it's a wholly American holiday. Seen here on the cover of the book are two children oohing and ahhing with jack-o'-lanterns. This is a black and white photograph that I actually found on eBay. And the whole idea was my publisher actually created it in color. So it's a great example of how children themselves would actually realize Halloween was something to be celebrated. Well, Noah Webster describes Halloween as October 31st, observed especially with dressing up in disguise, trick-or-treating, and displaying jack-o'-lanterns during the evening. However, Halloween is more than simply a date or dressing up in disguise. It has deep roots in the Celtic culture of Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, and the Isle of Man. Halloween is short for All Hallows Eve and has its origins dating back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, the Celtic New Year's festival. The Morrigan was the Celtic deity associated with war and fate, who led her people, often appearing as a crow. All Hallows really means summer's end, and the festival celebrated the end of the harvest season and the coming of winter. The Celts believed that the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead were thinnest at this time, and the dead could return and walk where they had once had before. Further, those who had died in the past year and who, for one reason or another, had not yet moved on, would do so at this time and could interact with the living. Well, in that instance, we realize that Halloween is something we're told only go to houses that have a light on either the porch or piazza. Seen here on Lewisburg Square, probably they have the large-sized Snickers candy bar. Each doorway is lighted, and on the park itself we see jack-o'-lanterns glowing in the dark. Trick-or-treating has become something that children loved, but in mid-20th century America, it was something that was incredible, and hundreds, if not thousands of children would descend upon the streets of Cohasset. But it's also the fact that we realize that even the wonderful ducklings in Boston Common wear their Halloween costumes. Dressed in their festive Halloween costumes, these bronze ducklings in the public garden in Boston were sculpted by Nancy Schoen as a recreation of the Mallard family in Robert McCluskey's children's classic book, Make Way for Ducklings. Seen here are the ducklings. Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack are led by Mrs. Mallard, who in the classic story lived on an island in the lagoon of the Boston Public Garden. Mrs. Mallard taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. They're on their way to visit Policeman Michael, who feeds them peanuts daily. So we began to realize in some ways that the aspect of Halloween, which arose in the very early part of the 20th century, would be, by here, the 1960s, children carving a jack-o'-lantern. The little girl wears a mandarin outfit, the little boy a skeleton outfit with a witch's hat, but they're surrounded by shocks of corn and Indian corn. It's not just the Halloween, but it's the aspect of celebrating the festival. And children loved it, not only in the 1960s, but even in the 1940s, seen here, when these two little boys, after having carved a jack-o'-lantern and lit the candle from within, see their faces illuminated. And you can almost anticipate the excitement of going out at dusk with a pillowcase, maybe even a shopping bag, to go from house to house to get candy. Well, in that way, the jack-o'-lantern is associated with the Irish folktale of Stingy Jack. Has anybody ever heard of Stingy Jack? Well, Stingy Jack was a clever con man who fooled the devil into banning him from hell, but because of his sinful life, could not enter heaven. I know a few people like that. After his death, he roamed the world carrying a small lantern made from a turnip, with a red-hot ember from hell inside to light his way. Many believe this legend evolved from the sightings of the will-o'-wisp, swamp, and marsh gases which glowed in the night. On All Hallows Eve, the Irish hollowed out turnips and carved them with faces, placing a candle inside, so as they went about souling on the night when the veil between life and death was thinnest, they would be protected from spirits like Stingy Jack. Well, in the 17th century, our Puritan ancestors, when they settled Massachusetts Bay Colony, brought many of the Celtic beliefs and mysticism with them. It was thought that many people could be witches. And seen here during the witchcraft trials in Salem of 1692, this little booklet, which was published in London in 1643 by John Hammond, gave the story of a woman who was known as the Witch of Newbury, England. The book, A Most Certain, Strange, and True Discovery of a Witch, was a pamphlet that described this woman. She was not only outre and unique, but somewhat of a recluse in the town, to the terror of the soldiers who represented the Civil War soldiers. She would tread on the water with her feet with as much ease and firmness as if she should walk and trample on the earth. And when she was overtaken by soldiers, the purported witch was fired upon by the soldiers, and with a deriding and loud laughter, she caught their bullets in her hands and chewed them. Not only could she walk on water, but she had the best dentures in Newbury, England. Depicted as an old barefoot woman, she was further beset by two black ravens, the harbingers of doom, and oft companions to witches. The pamphlet ends, they immediately discharged a pistol underneath her ear, at which she straight sunk down and died, leaving her legacy of a detested carcass to the worms. Her soul we not ought to judge of, though the evils of her wicked life and death can scape no censure. This was something the Puritans brought to New England, the true belief that these were not only witches, but it created in some ways a schism in Massachusetts by the latter part of the 17th century. And seen here is the Reverend Increase Mather. He was the son of the Reverend Richard Mather, who was not only a staunch Puritan, but he was the first minister of the Dorchester Meeting House. He was educated at Harvard College, and he opposed anything openly contradictory to, mutually exclusive with, or potentially distracting from his puritanical and narrow religious beliefs, taught by his father and the Puritan hierarchy. Well, in 1689, King William and Queen Mary would actually appoint a royal governor, and they actually sent Sir Edmund Andros to Boston as the governor of the Dominion of New England, and it was he who restored the Papist holidays, Easter and Christmas, and allowed a maypole to be set up in Charlestown. Mather was shocked and appalled. In fact, he said that the devil had become his march of triumph in Boston. He served as a minister of the Second Church in Boston, but he was also somebody who served as a president of Harvard College. And because he was thought to be one of the more erudite Puritan ministers in Boston, he was asked by a series of people in a synod to actually write this book, a further account of the trials of the New England witches. This was published in London in 1693, but as Mather was president of Harvard College and a respected clergyman, the book outlined the observations of a person who was upon the place several days when the suspected witches were first taken into examination. In his book, he called into question the use of spectral and other evidences allowed to be used by the judges in the witch trials. Spectral evidence meant that if you had the devil's mark upon you, obviously you were a witch. Well, what could that be? A freckle, a beauty mark, a pimple, or simply a blemish, and you could be deemed a witch. In the case of conscience, it states doubts arose, as we have stated, about evidence used in the trials, and it came about that the subject of the witch trials was discussed by the ministers, and in that way, the presiding judge of 9 judges would be Lieutenant Governor William Stoughton of Dorchester. He was appointed Chief Justice of the Court of Oyer and Terminator in 1692, which was the court that would judge whether or not you were a witch. He ruled over the trials with the determination to eradicate all witches from Massachusetts Bay Colony, and he was heavily influenced by his conservative and narrow-minded Puritan convictions. It was he who allowed spectral evidence of the afflicted girls to accuse their fellow townspeople of witchcraft. And when the court was dissolved, Stoughton continued to enjoy political success and never apologized for his role in the trials, though his co-8 judges did. And in that way, seen here in a painting of George Jacobs pleading before the court, we see a man on the lower right-hand side who was a well-to-do resident of Salem Village and well-respected. On the upper left-hand side, we see Lieutenant Governor William Stoughton surrounded by fellow judges. The problem was, the girl in the lower center pointing at George Jacobs is his granddaughter, and she accused him of being a witch. It was believed, and he was one of 20 witches that were hung. In that instance, you began to see people turning against family members, village members, and anyone who was thought to be unique. Well, in that instance, the only one of the 21 who were accused of witchcraft that were executed was Giles Corey. And seen here in a lithograph, this is a man who was accused of witchcraft by the 5 main proponents of the trials: Ann Putnam, Marcy Lewis, Abigail Williams, Mary Walcott, and Elizabeth Hubbard, and he's being led into court. He pleaded not guilty, but refused to be tried by the court, which, in his view, already determined his guilt. So he stood mute rather than putting himself on the country, which is a term to mean he said nothing to defend himself. Well, he was sentenced to peine forte dure, even though it was an illegal punishment, and ended up being torturously crushed to death by heavy boulders in 1692. One of the major factors which made Giles Corey a prime target was not only his relationship with the rest of the community, but a prior conviction for murder. His chosen means of resistance and dramatic death reveal a strength of character. Well, in that instance, you realize through the Celtic culture, much of this had been introduced to the New World. And whether they were from Great Britain or Ireland, these also included games that would be played on All Hallows Eve, or Halloween. This is the first of the 3 that I discuss, and it's called Snap Apple Night. You might want to notice on the lower right-hand side this group of children surrounding a wood tub filled with water and bobbing apples. Well, this was always celebrated on All Hallows Eve, a time when supernatural influences prevail, the time when spirits, both visible and invisible worlds, walk abroad and can be evoked by human powers for the purpose of revealing the mysterious future, and spirits can be called from the deep at will. The word Halloween actually means Saints' Evening, and it comes from a Scottish term for All Hallows Eve, the evening before All Hallows Day. Well, as you can see in this painting, the group of people, both family and friends, gather around together watching these children bob for apples. They look very happy, but I'm sure that it was with the inducement of alcohol. But the boys and girls were said if they actually bit into the apple and extracted it from the water by their teeth, they would actually get their favor. And in that way, you realize that even here, Halloween, in an etching that was done in 1790, shows people around a brazier. You can see it on the right-hand side, as an engaged girl places a nut on the fire. It was said if the nuts burnt quietly, the future marriage would be happy. However, if the nuts spat and hissed, the future marriage would be stormy. However, if the woman to be married put 2 nuts on the fire, one for her future husband and one for herself, and the nuts spat and hissed, then this was obviously a bad omen for their future happiness. Didn't we all do that? Leave it up to the nuts. And this is called the 3 luggies. The young girl is seen at the head of the table, blindfolded, with 3 plates in front of her. Well, she's told to put her hand into one of the 3 bowls in front of her. If she dips her fingers in the clear water, she'll marry a bachelor. If she dips her fingers in milky water, she'll marry a widower. And if into an empty bowl, then it's a sure sign that she will live in single blessedness all her days. Well, this ceremony must be gone through with 3 times, and the hand dipped twice into the same bowl in order to make the predictions of any value. Well, these are things that probably many of us had never heard of, but the idea here was that by the early 20th century, children are photographed in front of a zinc tub with water and apples bobbing. It says the sign above this tableau reads, "Shake hands with the ghost," with children bobbing for apples floating in a huge zinc tub, and they hold their hands aloft as a friend dressed as a ghost hovers above them and 2 levitate on either side. Bobbing for apples started in Europe hundreds of years ago as a common way for young lovers to court one another. Can you imagine? If they didn't drown, they might have married. If the bobber, typically a young girl, successfully bit into the apple with the name of a love interest in one go, then fortune favored the lucky couple and fate gave them the go-ahead. However, it's also said that the first person to bite an apple will be the next one in the group to have a marriage. Now, when you think about it, we could translate that to the bride, after her wedding, throwing the bouquet to all of the unmarried women, or throwing her garter to all the unmarried men. So in that instance, these are things that have evolved over time and still have a little bit of meaning to our lives. Well, seen here in a poem by John Greenleaf Whittier, which actually is on the back of this Hallmark card, a young boy and his very inquisitive spaniel look into a lighted jack-o'-lantern. It's charming, but it says, "When wild, ugly faces we carved in its skin, glaring out through the dark with a candle within. When we laughed round the corn heap with hearts all in tune, our chair a broad pumpkin, our lantern the moon, telling tales of the fairy who traveled like steam in a pumpkin shell coach with 2 rats for her team." You might think of Cinderella in her coach with rats. Well, in that way, this is something in some way people began to realize, and the basics of Halloween in Boston were now in place. Thanks to the immigrants in the 19th century from Ireland and the British Isles, with children going from house to house seeking sweet treats in the form of soul cakes and carrying jack-o'-lanterns. We give candy, but 80 or 90 years ago, our ancestors gave cake. Shortly after their arrival in the United States, the Irish had substituted the turnip for the pumpkin as their lantern of choice on Halloween, as it was much easier to carve. And the term trick-or-treating had evolved as it meant young people and children went on a destructive bend if they were not given treats, such as soul cakes or later candy. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I'm sure we've all heard stories of houses being egged or toilet papered simply because they didn't offer candy. Well, by 1900, some of the children that were now going out trick-or-treating would not just wear costumes, but they even wore some of their own clothing. This is a lovely photographic postcard of a young girl. She wears a white muslin dress with lace, obviously it's her Sunday best, a witch's hat with stars, and she carries a jack-o'-lantern. The black cat on the chair and the smiling moon all give us credence to what Halloween was now representing. Something that was mystical, but also something that was fun. And in that instance, these two little boys, and the back of this photographic postcard is 1911, shows the youngest of the brothers standing on a chair, dressed as an Indian with feathers in his cap, and the brother on the right is a clown. Both of them are holding lighted jack-o'-lanterns. So whether or not we wore our clothes or costume or even made do with something of our mother or father's, these were really quite fun. And seen here, this young trick-or-treater is dressed in a witch's hat and a swastika printed costume as she carries a jack-o'-lantern candy bucket and rides a corn broom. In Hinduism, the right-facing symbol is called a swastika, symbolizing Surya, or the sun, prosperity and good luck. However, before it was corrupted by the Nazi power in Germany, there was in the early 20th century a huge fad for the swastika as a benign good luck symbol. And the swastika remained a popular embroidery motif in Eastern Europe and Russia until its symbol of luck was forevermore corrupted. This photograph is 1921. So something as simple as a swastika, and I heard the groans, is something in some ways that again has been corrupted, but it still represented good luck prior to 1930. Well, by 1960, a group of young children, some brandishing battery-illuminated pumpkin lanterns on sticks, arrive at the steps of a house seeking Halloween treats. One has a pumpkin bucket for his candy, while others have large brown bags, which obviously meant to hold larger amounts of treats. You see the two little boys on the left, they wear their nightshirts. The one in the center has actually got a clown costume, but a devil's face. The little girl is adorable. I'll take her home. And the boy on the right is dressed as a devil. But you realize, because lighted jack-o'-lanterns could lead to an accident and inadvertently burn the child, these were battery operated and gave an illumination, but were safe. And Halloween was something by the 1950s and 60s that allowed creativity to come about. Well, the boy on the left is dressed as a record player cabinet with the Capitol Records of Canada record All My Loving by the Beatles on the front, ready to be played. I know you've never heard of them, you're far too young, but the band comprised John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, and is regarded to be among the most influential bands of all time. The record was released in 1963, and maybe you remember the tune. Close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. Remember, I'll always be true. And then while I'm away, I'll write home every day, and I'll send all my loving to you. Well, I don't think the boy realized the impact of his costume, but he had very creative parents, and it's a wonderful aspect of something that was timely. But we also realize that these children are dressed in E.T. costumes, and they descended upon Halloween in 1982. E.T. stands for the extraterrestrial, which was a science fiction movie produced and directed by Steven Spielberg, and it tells the story of Elliot, a boy who befriends the extraterrestrial, whom he dubbed E.T., who is stranded on Earth. Well, they're looking in every which direction, but on the left is an umbrella that's lined with Reynolds aluminum wrap, and there's an empty Martinson coffee can. Remember, poor E.T. wanted to reconnect with outer space, and it was thought he could actually connect with his family and friends through this. But then there was this little girl. Now, this is 1965. She's dressed as a clown's outfit and a little hat that's adorable and carries a bag that says, "Treats or I bite." Well, I don't know if it was she who was going to bite or the little chihuahua dressed as a clown who was going to bite, but she looks awfully determined to knock on that door. People enjoyed it, but it was also something that was a rite of passage, and there was always that one housewife here in Cohasset that arrived at the door with a sterling silver candy dish and allowed the children to take one piece of candy each. Well, Mother got a little bit of a head start on it. She brought her children dressed in costume just before dusk, so they actually had a little bit of extra time to get candy. This is my favorite of the entire book. These two children have smiles that are just infectious. The little boy actually wears a red poncho embroidered with clowns and a star-speckled hat. The little girl is dressed as a princess with the construction paper crown, and their grocery shopping bag has an equally smiling skeleton face. But what was really fun about this is when I was a child, our house actually had the same storm door. And my sister was just that much older than I was, so I always correlated to my 1 or 2 times that I was allowed out of the house to trick or treat. But some of them were quite fun. Holy Batmania. This group of Bat Boys and Bat Girls are dressed and ready to protect Gotham in relation to the 1989 Batman movie, which starred Michael Keaton and played in theaters continuously for almost 6 months. Batman was a beloved comic book character, and he and his sidekick Robin were well-known television characters in the immensely popular show. The catchphrases were "Batman has no limits" and Robin's "holy whatever" exclamations. But you can see both boys and girls not only wear jerseys with the black bat, but they even have Batman's wonderful masks. Quite fun. And of course here, Colonel Harley Sanders started a nationwide fast food chain restaurant known as Kentucky Fried Chicken. And though an attorney, his great claim to fame was he had a secret recipe for frying chicken that he started in Utah. With a few years, the company was franchised and had more than 600 locations across the United States. And in 1964, he sold Kentucky Fried Chicken, but even after its sale, it was referred to as the Colonel's Chicken. Well, these two children not only have Colonel Sanders' face mask, a blouse, which is basically supposed to be a little bit of a jacket with that wonderful string tie, but a repurposed chicken bucket as their candy retainer. And here, a baby is dressed as Ruth Bader Ginsburg for Halloween. And wearing the trademark eyeglasses and lace J-bow collar and holding a wood gavel, the child has a baby Ruth candy bar in front of her on the high chair table. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was an attorney and jurist who served as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States from 1993 until her death in 2020. And after a lifetime of flourishing in the face of adversity, she became an icon for empowered women who perceived her success as well-deserved and that something all men and women should try to emulate. Well, even here, Aaliyah Elaine on the left and Kadeem Dixon wear Lion King Simba Halloween costumes at the Franklin Park Zoo Howl in 1998. The Lion King is a movie by Walt Disney that premiered in 1994 and soon was adapted as a critically acclaimed Broadway musical and later as a book. All show how the lion takes his place in the circle of life. Well, the popularity of this character was immense, and the beloved Simba became a popular icon. All of these things were popular, but seen here in the White House in 1963, we realize that President John Fitzgerald Kennedy had 2 children who I don't think were going from house to house in Washington, but Caroline is dressed as a witch, and my God, is that a realistic face? And young John is dressed as a a skeleton, along with a white outfit. Everyone loved Halloween. But in that instance, it wasn't just the fact that you could make a costume or you could actually reuse something that might be old. By 1920, a company by the name of Weldon's created a catalog of 200 designs for fancy dress for children. Here on the cover, a little boy on the left has become the Pearly King of London, a dairymaid, a girl in a kimono from Japan, and a gypsy. These were fun, but with simple scraps of material, someone could run up on the sewing machine or sew by hand a quick outfit. And in that instance, children became somewhat individualistic. But by the period of 1923, Gibbs and Art Company from Cincinnati produced a booklet called Decorations and Party Goods for Halloween. Well, the cover had a black cat smiling at us, orange eyes, nose, and mouth. And within this, it gave all sorts of different explanations of how you could actually decorate for Halloween. It had things that young children could follow to make a black cat mask. Piece of black construction paper, cut out small areas where the eyes would be seen, and of course 2 holes on either side, so with the use of twine, it could be affixed to the back of the head, and you became a black cat for Halloween. It also gave things such as balloons that could be decorated as clowns, as well as you see on the upper right-hand side, hollowing out an orange shell to make it into a basket for fruit. These were fun, and they were great arts and crafts projects for the children leading up to Halloween. But this company, the Kirchhoff Patent Company, was somebody who repurposed themselves. They were founded in 1915 to produce crickets. Now, crickets would be used during the war. You might remember back to 1915 to 1918, many of the soldiers were in trenches. They knew who was on either side of them, but they didn't know who was on the ends or across from them. And the cricket was something that would make a sound. So if you knew that cricket and the sound, you knew that there was a friend. Well, after the war ended in 1918, they created a Halloween line. Now remember, if you have 100 children, and maybe they look all like E.T. or Batman, you would want to know that your child was safe. Well, the cricket was something that would actually still make a sound, and you would hopefully hear that cricket from the child. Bless you. They also created whirligurgs, which was a wooden box, and with a handle you'd whiz it. And of course, down below, a circular piece with dried beans, which was almost like a mariachi. Well, in that instance, these were used during Halloween right through to the 1940s, and they were decorated in orange with a black cat, a black owl, a black witch, varieties of things. And it was something that really was quite popular. But it was also the fact by the period of the 1950s, many different stores would set up a counter just for Halloween. This is S.S. Kresge. Do you remember Kresge's? Yeah. Well, this was in Jamaica Plain, and it was a seasonal display of jack-o'-lanterns. You see here, not only were they plastic, but they were battery operated. And you began to see not just masks, but also candy. Simplistic, but by that period after World War II, people such as here at W.T. Grant and Company would have a costume section that said, "Who will you be on Halloween?" Well, in the case, you can see all sorts of things that you could actually get. Yes, there were crickets, but there were also little horns with a rubber bulb. But on the left-hand side was one of many racks of costumes, and you could choose what you would wish to be. A skeleton, a princess, or a dinosaur, maybe Mickey Mouse. But by this period, the costumes were flame retardant. Remember, a lighted jack-o'-lantern, no matter how careful someone is, especially a child, could drop, break, and ignite fabric. In this instance, this was something that began to show the incline towards being more careful than sorry. And even here at Jack's Joke Shop in Boston, they had a whole wall covered with latex Halloween masks of the famous and not so famous, including politicians, animals, monsters, Cleopatra, and Marilyn Monroe. Founded in 1922 in Scully Square, this was a company that offered a variety of tricks, jokes, novelties, magic supplies, as well as theatrical supplies, including costumes, makeup, and wigs. It was fun, but it was more for the adult. And of course, seen here in the early 1970s, F.W. Woolworth, originally a 5-and-dime company. This actually offered flame-retardant Halloween trick-or-treating outfits. These were $1.98, and they were usually one piece. We see in the very center a skeleton, Donald Duck, and a witch. On the right-hand side, they actually had masks, You could simply wear a sheet. And of course, candy. And here, the little sound horns. These were, again, little trumpets with a vinyl or rubber bulb that you would simply squeeze and it would make a sound. All very good for the child to be seen and heard. But even Sears Roebuck catalog, some 600 pages, would have actually 3 to 4 pages of Halloween outfits. And for $4.30, not only were they flame resistant, but they would be sent to you. They were a little bit sexist. If you look at the bottom, a young girl is encouraged to be a Red Cross nurse, a ballerina, a majorette, a beauty contestant, or a princess. And a little boy on the upper left-hand side could either be a Marine or an Army man, a policeman, an Indian, and a construction worker. The non-binary, I guess, word is on the upper right-hand side, and anyone could be Batman, Superman, Mickey Mouse, or even Minnie Mouse. So these again were the type of things that now children looked forward to, but they were something in some ways that would continue right up until the 1980s. Now, you're of the right age. Do you remember lunch boxes that were tin? And they would actually have all sorts of different things from television characters and cartoon characters. And the idea was they also had Halloween costumes in that same vein. Well, this shows superstars and their bright flame retardant costumes. And they went the gamut, as you can see here, from Bugs Bunny, Hot Wheels, Bam Bam, Pebbles, Casper the Friendly Ghost, as well as Popeye. These were flame retardant, beautifully done, and could be kept from year to year for the next brother or sister along the way. But one thing that was done in the early 1960s was, "Have gun, will travel," the motto of Paladin. Beginning in 1958, this was a popular Western television series starring Richard Boone and Cam Tong that was produced and originally broadcast on both television as well as radio. The television version of the series was rated number 3 in the Nielsen ratings every year of its first 4 seasons, and is one of the few shows in television history to spawn a successful radio version. So with this 5-piece outfit, including a vest, mask, tie ring, and belt slide, what young boy wouldn't be proud to be Paladin on Halloween? Does anybody remember Paladin? He was really quite popular. But Halloween costumes are fun, but the whole thing about Halloween is to get candy. Seen here are marshmallow witches made by Carlton, and they're all individually wrapped. But Halloween seems to be a night when children roam the streets dressed in costumes and masks or homemade attire and seek candy from every house within walking distance. Candy companies such as Curtis, Brock's, Nestle, Schrafft's, Mars, Hershey's, Luden's, Carlton's, and Necco, among others, offered everything under the sun, from the well-known Baby Ruth, Butterfinger, Mars Bar, Fifth Avenue, Nestle Crunch, and Nutlog candy bars, to Cracker Jack, Wrigley's chewing gum, Wowee chewing gum whistles, Pez candy, Indian corn, and even fresh fruit, which was the house you stayed away from. But in that instance, Curtis, seen here, had 6 varieties that would be offered as trick-or-treats. Buy them by the box. Well, this actually included Baby Ruth, Butterfinger, 5-cent bar, Coconut Grove, Chum Bubblegum, and a 2-cent bar. The 5-cent bar today is $2.49 at CVS. Founded in 1960 by Otto Schneering, this was a company that had to change their name because during World War I, many Germans were actually discriminated against. And the first candy made by Curtis was called Candy Cake. It was later renamed in 1920 as the log-shaped Baby Ruth candy bar. And the second candy made was the chocolate-covered peanut butter crunch Butterfinger, which was introduced in 1926. So in that instance, you began to see the traditional things that some of us still enjoy were not only important, but it was also the fact that they did advertisements right up until the very present. This advertisement from the 1980s shows a group of children in costumes standing in front of a house. And the adage says, "This is the house that has Brock's candy. Somebody ring the doorbell." Well, I don't think there are many children that are reticent for ringing the doorbell, but it's a good example to realize that many people were quite generous. Well, this woman offers Baby Ruth and Butterfinger candy bars to 2 trick-or-treaters. Dressed as a witch and a bunny rabbit, these 2 children smile at the candy as their bag says, "Tricks or treat." A Baby Ruth is a candy bar made of peanuts, caramel, and milk chocolate covered nougat, covered in a compound chocolate. And a Butterfinger is a candy bar made by Nestle. These were something that were popular, and as you can see, they were larger than the others that many would serve. But do you remember Schraff's chocolate at Sullivan Square in Charlestown? Well, it basically was something that not only made wonderful chocolates, but bonbons in boxes, sometimes 1, 2, and 3 pounds in size, but even in decorative tins. During Halloween, they actually earned 15% of their average annual sales making Halloween candy. Now, Schraff's was a major company, so their chocolate was terribly good. But seen here on the bottom, they had Schraff's peppermint patties. In the center, a caramello bar, and on the right, a chocolate-covered marshmallow bar. Well, these weren't just available individually, but you could buy an entire box. So children, unfortunately, in some ways, would only get one, though they were the best candy available. They also offer the Milky Way bar, and seen here in a shopping bag, which a child is using to collect his or her candy loot, we have a black cat that says "Tricks or Treats" on its lips, but it says here, "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty." Well, it's not the cat that we're calling, the kitty is the child. And of course, who wouldn't want a Milky Way bar? Well, seen here, Sweet Stock and Mars was said to be the family choice for candy. A trick-or-treater dressed as a clown watches as a haystack eats Mars Milky Way candy bar. When tricks or treats is the question, here are 2 perfect answers. Get Mars 6-packs and Mars 24s. However, whichever size you choose, there were 2 varieties available: chocolate nugget with milk chocolate coating and vanilla nugget with a dark chocolate coating, each originally selling for 5 cents. Candy was important, but so too wasn't that house that might serve a box of Cracker Jack as a trick-or-treat. Now, Cracker Jack, with its caramel, corn, and peanuts, it not only made the perfect treat anytime, but it said the more you eat, the more you want. But it was fun because there was a prize within every box, and you can see the children very happy. There was also Pez candy. Now, Pez is something that was actually started in 1927 by Edward Haas, and the name Pez is an abbreviation of Pfefferminz, the German word for peppermint. Now, these were dispensers that actually started off simply as a chalky candy, as an acquired taste. But they were also served in dispensers that were the size of a cigarette lighter. But by the 1950s, heads were introduced, and it might be a witch's head for Halloween, a Santa Claus head or a reindeer head for Christmas, maybe an Easter bunny or a chicken for Easter. But these were very popular, but somewhat expensive. 2 Pez packs were 25 cents, which actually had 6 in each pack, which was a little bit expensive. But it was, again, something that children really did like. But there was always that one house that didn't have candy and didn't have Cracker Jacks. The household would offer a 6-pack treat, so you could choose a box of cereal. Well, this was Post's treat pack, and it says fall Post cereals happen to be just a little bit better. I look at the poor child, and he's raising his mask in astonishment. But he does choose an Alpha-Bits box of cereal, so breakfast is ensured in the morning. Well, there was also games, and as we were children, some of us didn't always go out trick-or-treating. There were party games, and seen here was the Halloween fake game. And this had black bats, stars, and crescent moons decorating the 4 corners. And this was a game of fate or fortune. And during that period, you would spin the dial, and it would tell you one of 16 fates that would befall you on Halloween. Children loved it. And the fates were, your dog will eat your homework, a bat will steal your hat, eat an apple a day or your teeth will fall out, and if you wake up late tomorrow, eat a lemon. Well, they were fun. Children loved it. But these games were something in some ways that even Parker Brothers made the Black Cat fortune-telling game. And this was something that showed a black cat with a red bow tie on the box cover, and the game included 4 sets of 6 cards each related to a suit, hearts, diamonds, spades, and clubs, with images of cats on the obverse and fortunes printed on the reverse. And the cards are used to foretell everything from the future, present, past, danger, general advice, and love matters. These games in some ways would even include Halloween pick-a-pumpkin fortune. And in the center we see a witch reading through the book of spells, a cauldron steaming on the left, an owl sitting on a branch in front of the moon. And again, these would actually have small fortunes that made the children laugh. Well, in some ways, by the period of the 1920s and 30s, some of these, such as whimsy witzes, would actually be something that was fortune-telling. And this was something that had a smiling witch with an owl perched on her outstretched arm and the other holding her broom as she stands behind a steaming cauldron. The box of stunts, a fortune-telling game of forfeits, was a board game and produced in 1928 that included fortune-telling, a game of forfeits, lucky cards, and party suggestions. These were something in some ways that would lead to mysticism. And seen here, the Hand of Fate fortune-telling game was produced in 1901. And the cover of the box has a young bespectacled girl dressed in a witch's costume with a peaked red hat and cape, reading to a black cat, both inside a ring with symbols of the zodiac. Around the ring are black cats, bats, and owls. And the Hand of Fate was a popular parlor game that piqued Victorians' fascination with mysticism. And this would lead some ways to such things as fortunes by the luminous spirit. Well, this was done in the 1940s as spirited fun for parties, young and old. The center of the game has a witch riding her broom, which acts as an arrow to point out one of the 12 fortunes. And the odd charms, symbols, and creatures include a ghost, bat, devil, and snake. These all would lead up to the Ouija board. And the Ouija board, as you can see here, was something that was a very difficult thing for many people to actually have in their homes. It was verboten in my home. Norman Rockwell depicted this well-dressed couple in 1920 using a Ouija board to guess their future fate together. Will the spirits tell them of their future in a positive or negative response? William Fool produced boards under the name of Ouija, claiming that he learned the name Ouija from using the board and that it was an ancient Egyptian word meaning good luck. He later changed that, and he popularized the more widely accepted etymology that the name came from a combination of French and German words for yes, Ouija. Well, the Ouija board was something that, when it was done, could actually move of its own accord and not only tell stories, but it became quite frightening. So as you can see, it would lead up from fun games to mysticism as well as, of course, the Ouija. But no real hostess in the 1960s would be without a spider web skirt to entertain her family of friends on Halloween night. Maybe she was channeling Elwyn White's book Charlotte's Web, in which Wilbur the pig is befriended by a spider named Charlotte, whose web was woven in a barn doorway overlooking Wilbur's enclosure. And when Wilbur discovers that he is being raised for slaughter, she promises to hatch a plan guaranteed to spare his life. What better way to make a Halloween fashion statement than by wearing a spider web skirt? And Leanne Gouthier did this poem, "Flutter, flutter, little bat, how I wonder where you're at. Swooping through the darkest night, you find your way without a light. Flutter, flutter, little bat, how I wonder where you're at. Well, we might have a dinner party on Halloween, and seen here, a group of adults sit around the table. The hostess has made party hats with orange construction paper. She has orange candles at the dining room table, and they're having dessert, which in this instance are hollowed out shells of orange with orange sherbet. Colorful, family-oriented, but it was also something the dessert. So what would you serve for food on Thanksgiving? Well, my father was a vice president of Armour for 25 years. My sister and I were guinea pigs. We tried everything. And I can remember tasting Armour's weenie witches, which were skinless frankfurters or wieners. You can see here they're being roasted over an open fire, and your goblins will gobble them up. Well, they were good. They had an open fire flavor. I can't imagine serving hot dogs for dinner, but this was for Halloween. You might actually include such things as a bewitching Halloween surprise, which in this instance is by Baker's Chocolate. Extra rich, luscious with Baker's Chocolate. On the left is a spice cake with white chocolate frosting, and on the right, cupcakes dripping in Baker's milk chocolate. Well, not only was it the oldest manufacturer of chocolate in the United States, but it's still made under General Foods. But the one dessert that I made last night and we will enjoy this evening is a midnight cake. Have a spooky Halloween party and serve this cake. This has been served in my family since I can remember. It's bewitching, and this black midnight cake is just the thing for your Halloween festivities. Strikingly dark and chocolatey, delicious, moist, tender, and light, the recipe we welcome by thousands who are eager to learn how to make the perfect black devil's food cake. Not only does it have white icing, so it's good and bad, but we always added raisins to it. No idea why, but I still do. So it's something in some ways that you begin to see even food in the house had the aspect of Halloween. So when you began to realize costumes, candy, but there was also food and now greeting cards. By the early part of the 20th century, penny postcards were being produced for almost every holiday. Halloween was considered a holiday, and in 1901, this postcard was printed, and it was called a penny postcard because it had a penny stamp. Family and friends sometimes lived further afield than they ever had, and here, a young girl dressed as a witch, sitting on a pumpkin, holding her black cat and broom, says, "Halloween greetings. May Halloween's frolics engage you tonight, and your future by witches predicted be bright." Well, what a nice card. But the whole idea is children love these things. And seen here, some of the sayings were really quite interesting. This woman holds a jack-o'-lantern. She has a black skirt with the signs of the zodiac printed on the sides. And we have a black cat and a moon who doesn't look very happy. The Halloween lantern. At 12 o'clock, you must be good and ready, and hold your pumpkin good and steady, for by its rays of candlelight, on Halloween all things are bright. And by the 1915 period, every child would have a sleepless night because it said Halloween time. Tonight upon your pillow, close your eyes and hide your head, for the fairies and the goblins will be hovering round your bed. Great story for children. And here, this is something I want to try. If at midnight with pumpkin light you steal to your room unseen, in the mirror appears the face of your lover true on Halloween. So you've got to hold a jack-o'-lantern lighted with a candle, look in the mirror, you'll see yourself, but you're supposed to see your lover true. I wonder if it's true. And of course, by that period of the 1940s, this thrilling Halloween was a postcard done by Ellen Clapsaddle and depicts two frightened children reading Ye Ghost Story. 'Tis certainly a thrilling Halloween. Clapsaddle was a well-known artist at the turn of the 20th century and who was recognized as one of the most prolific postcard and greeting card artists of her era. She did wonderful things, and seen here, Ellen Clapsaddle depicts a jolly Halloween, and had a boy dressed in a white-collared robe holding a large jack-o'-lantern. The boy's arm has a metal rivet that allows the arm and the pumpkin to move to cover his face. Clapsaddle was acclaimed during her career for her prodigious work, and her artistic designs have become highly prized. She's credited with over 3,000 designs in the postcard field during her career. And of course here, a black cat has become a maestro, and the choir are singing jack-o'-lanterns. It says, "Sing a song of Halloween, pumpkins everywhere, cats and bats and witches are flying through the air." And of course, this one from 1990 Hallmark Cards has an adorable black kitten jumping out of a jack-o'-lantern surrounded by black bats and stars. And it said, "Black cats, witches' hats, jack-o'-lanterns, black, orange, white, green, these are the colors of Halloween." People loved it, and even here with the traditional witch, Halloween greetings. Dame Fortune will have smiled on me, her cat's the blackest ever seen, will have brought to me the best of luck if I may see you on Halloween. Fun, and children loved it, but didn't adults. Well, Halloween might be an old-fashioned way of saying the night before All Saints' Day, but it has become so much more than that. Halloween is still considered a powerful turning point in the wheel of the year, signifying the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The pumpkin is often linked to rebirth and fertility and symbolizes harvest and crops. So with the tip of the hat to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain, we realize that Halloween has come full circle. And the poem is, "Since this is the time for goblins and bats, Halloween spirits, ghosts and cats, weird happenings and witches brew, these are the things I wish for you." Well, this book on Halloween was something that was a joy to write. I remembered things from my youth, and many people that I talked with would tell me stories. Photographs, postcards, everything imaginable would be done in some ways to illustrate it. I do have copies of the book. They're $20 a piece, but this is a great way to reminisce, not only the way we trick-or-treated, but sometimes with our grandchildren, how it's changed in the 21st century. Happy Halloween, and thank you for listening.